What if tomorrow a single missile sank the world's energy heartbeat? Oil spikes past $200 per barrel, global trade freezes, and your gas pump goes silent. This is TubeGeo. Today we journey into the Strait of Hormuz, geography's chokehold, Iran's strategic poker, and the global fallout we can't escape. This narrow strip of sea, just 33 kilometers wide, controls the energy security of over 2.5 billion people. It's a geopolitical fuse, always lit, never detonated, until one day, it might be. Let's dive in. The Strait of Hormuz is nature's most efficient bottleneck. At its slimmest, it measures just 33 kilometers or 21 nautical miles, barely wider than the length of Manhattan. Yet through this sliver of sea passes the lifeblood of the global economy, millions of barrels of oil, vast cargoes of LNG, and over 30,000 ships a year. International law assigns two 2-mile-wide lanes, one inbound, one outbound, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. These aren't optional paths. For the world's largest tankers, they're a precise, non-negotiable route. In these confines, maneuverability is minimal. One navigational error, or one strategic strike, can paralyze global energy flows in an instant. To the north, Iran's coastline towers over the strait, armed with missile silos, naval bases, and radar stations. This elevated, fortified geography gives Tehran a natural position of dominance. To the south, Oman's dramatic Musandam Peninsula adds natural cover. The deeper waters here are favored by captains, but even then, they sail in constant proximity to Iranian territory. This isn't just a bottleneck, it's a planetary pressure point, where geography grants enormous influence, but also extraordinary risk. Here, a single ripple can become a global wave. Every day, about 20 million barrels of crude oil traverse the strait, roughly 20% of global oil consumption, and over 1/4 of all seaborne oil trade. At the same time, about 20 to 25% of global LNG exports pass through here, mainly from Qatar and the UAE. This staggering flow fuels the world economy, but it comes at a cost, vulnerability. Let's look at who's most at risk and why. 1. Asia, the vulnerable powerhouse. In 2024, 84% of Hormuz oil and 83% of its LNG went to Asia. Those top four, China, India, Japan, South Korea, account for 75% of oil and 59% of LNG shipments through the strait. China, approximately 38% of the strait's crude passed to China, around 5.4 million barrels per day in Q1 2025. India received approximately 2.1 million barrels per day via Hormuz. Japan and South Korea. Japan sources 87% of its fossil fuel needs from imports, South Korea 81%, ranking them most exposed. Europe gets less crude via Hormuz, but relies heavily on LNG. In 2024, approximately 86 billion cubic meters of LNG transited the strait, about 20% of global LNG use. With Russia's supply constrained, Europe still spent over 225 billion euros importing LNG from 2022 to 2024. Italy, Belgium, Poland, particularly reliant on LNG via Hormuz. High LNG prices in North Asia have pushed European gas to 29 euros per million British thermal units, reviving energy security fears. The U.S. imports only around 0.5 million barrels per day of Persian Gulf oil, just 7% of its crude imports and 2% of total consumption. But markets are global, so a Hormuz shock still ripples through U.S. pump prices and inflation. Already, tension is costing real money. In late June 2025, LNG shipping rates hit 8-month highs as tankers rushed and insurers hiked premiums. Supertankers began U-turns near Hormuz after U.S. strikes, pushing freight rates above $60,000 per day. Brent crude surged to near $78 per barrel, and analysts warn of climbing to $90 to $130 if tensions escalate. In 2024, Asia got more than 80% of Hormuz oil and LNG. Without this route, entire economies stall. This map is more than a trade chart, it's a risk map. Asia, the engine of global growth, depends on Hormuz's lifeblood. Europe, already building climate resilience, remains vulnerable to gas shocks. Even the US feels pressure through global price knock-on effects. With global dependency established, next we reveal how Iran's asymmetric capabilities turn this vital artery into a strategic weapon. Since US and Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure began in mid-June 2025, tensions have escalated. Tehran responded not with aircraft carriers, but with a weapon perfectly tailored to the strait's cramped geography. Asymmetric warfare, mines, missile batteries, fast attack boats, drones, and even cyber disruptions. In late June, U.S. intelligence confirmed Iran's secretly loaded naval mines onto civilian ships in the Gulf, a move clearly signaling intent to mine the strait if ordered by the Supreme National Security Council. Iran is reportedly believed to possess over 5,000 naval mines, enough to strand tanker convoys for weeks, and if such mines were deployed, virtually every ship in the lanes would face immediate peril. Tehran's northern coastline is bristling with missile systems, anti-ship cruise missiles, and land-based ballistic arsenals. Even the threat of launching them sends insurance rates soaring and tanker operators into crisis mode. Iranian commanders openly state they view Hormuz as a national leverage point, the sword of Damocles dangling over their adversaries' heads. Iran's doctrine emphasizes small, lethal, agile, swarming speedboats, UAV strikes, even mines dropped from silent submarines, designed to overwhelm protective escorts and disrupt navigation. In mid-June, tankers began broadcasting false nationality signals, claiming to be China-owned or Russian, to avoid Iranian targeting. Electronic interference, jamming, spoofing is now rampant. One false signal could reroute a supertanker into a minefield or collision zone. This is not hypothetical. In the 1980s tanker war, Iran heavily mined the Gulf. In 2019, unexploded mines attacked 2 tankers near Fujairah. Most analysts trace them to Tehran. Following June 13th, Israel's Mossad coordinated drone sabotage, triggering widespread U.S. retaliation. Iran loaded mines shortly after. Parliament also backed a non-binding motion to close Hormuz, though execution depends on the Supreme Council. Some analysts argue mining the strait is more flash than bang, designed to signal resolve, not sustain closure. However, U.S. mine countermeasure ships, Fifth Fleet presence, and regional deterrence may only delay the disruption. The takeaway? Iran knows how to escalate fast and how to step back, leaving global energy markets perpetually on edge. Iran's asymmetric arsenal is tailored for this trench. Missile sites high on the shore, mines riding beneath the waves, boats and drones navigating covert lanes. Even without a full closing, their mere presence is enough to send markets into panic. Next in Section 4, we'll explore the economic and military deterrents that push back, and why a permanent chokehold on Hormuz remains Tehran's most dangerous gamble. Despite Iran's potent asymmetric toolkit, a full closure of the Strait of Hormuz would be an act of mutual destruction, especially for Tehran. Let's unpack why this geographic chokepoint cuts both ways. An estimated 96% of Iran's oil exports pass through Hormuz, their economic lifeline. A blockade would flood their own economy into chaos, plummeting revenue, skyrocketing inflation, and domestic unrest. Such self-inflicted damage wouldn't go unnoticed by even Iran's strongest allies. China and Russia would be quick to pressure Tehran economically. The result? No grand strategic gain, only self-harm. Gulf states invested heavily in bypass pipelines to hedge against exactly this scenario. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline, Petroline, spans 1,200 kilometers from Abqaiq to Yanbu, bypassing Hormuz entirely, with a capacity of 5 million barrels per day, potentially ramping up to 7 million barrels per day within 2 years. UAE's Habshan-Fujairah pipeline runs 360 kilometers from Abu Dhabi to Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, moving 1.5 million barrels per day, with future upgrades targeting 1.8 million barrels per day, effectively bypassing Hormuz. Combined, these pipelines offer around 6.5 million barrels per day of rerouted capacity. That's significant, but still far short of the 20 million barrels per day flowing through Hormuz. So while they provide resilience, they're not bulletproof replacements. On the security front, the U.S. Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, is the ultimate deterrent. The fleet employs manned-unmanned teaming with drones and surface vessels to track Iranian activity day and night. As Vice Admiral Brad Cooper noted, this enhances maritime domain awareness and deters malign activity in the strait. Mine clearance ships, combat vessels, and multinational patrols are routinely deployed to ensure safe commerce. Even so, many analysts paint U.S. minesweeping vessels as aging and under-resourced, raising doubts about their ability to clear a heavily mined strait. In theory, OPEC Plus can throttle supply to plug any crisis hole, but it's no silver bullet. A recent Reuters analysis found that only Saudi Arabia and UAE could quickly boost output by roughly 3.5 million barrels per day combined, effectively covering lost Iranian volumes. But tapping that buffer risks jeopardizing global stability, removing the cushion they may need during a full-blown crisis. Iran's parliament did vote in June to support closing Hormuz, but ultimate authority lies with the Supreme National Security Council and the Supreme Leader. This dual-track system allows Tehran to escalate diplomatically without crossing an irreversible threshold, keeping global markets on edge without triggering full closure. The Strait of Hormuz remains human, political, and economic pressure cookers. Iran wields geographic leverage, but it comes with heavy risks. Gulf pipelines provide backup, but not total replacement. The U.S. fleet stands ready, but is not invulnerable, and OPEC plus buffer is limited. All sides hold a colored fuse. Each one can light the global economy's powder keg. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a place, it's the pulse of our global economy. One narrow passage, connecting continents, powering industries, shaping futures. But with every passing tanker, the world holds its breath. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, subscribe to TubeGeo, because the next global shock might already be sailing your way.